Hello, everybody. My name is Jennifer Cassinson and with Build Exact, and thank you for joining us today. It is my privilege to have Sarah Gutterman here with us today, who is the co-founder and CEO of Green Builder Media. And if you haven't seen Green Builder Media, you should definitely get in, check it out. Right now, too, I do want to plug that they've got a survey going that they really want everybody to respond to. So take a look at that because that will help inform how we're thinking about the industry, a lot of different aspects. And so that's what she's bringing to us today is some of her research findings through the portion of their business called Cognition. And she's going to share with us what consumers are looking for and how you can respond to that. And so thank you so much for joining us today, Sarah. I'm going to pass it over to you. And as you guys have questions, please put them in the chat and we'll address those at the end of the session. So again, over to you, Sarah, and thanks so much for joining us.
Wonderful. Well, Jennifer, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And it's always a pleasure to talk about this topic. It's for anyone that has heard me present before, you know that I love to talk about Cognition Smart Data, which is Green Builder Media's market intelligence and data services. And just to give some context to you all, who might not be familiar with Green Builder Media, we are North America's leading media company focused on green building and sustainable living. 2025 is our 20th anniversary, so we've been doing this for a while. We've seen a lot of ebbs and flows, recessions, and markets of boom and bust. We've seen political headwinds and regression from sustainability priorities, and then times of just blasting fast forward. We've kind of seen it all in our decades of being around. And so what I'm going to share with you today, as Jennifer said, is some of our Cognition Smart Data and market intelligence and insights on builders and consumers. What I will say is I'm very encouraged, believe it or not, despite the political headwinds, despite all of the uncertainty in the marketplace, because really what I see is this undeniable transformation to a decarbonized built environment. And that's a pretty kind of weighty and lofty concept. But the truth is that the market factors, the market data, the trends, the purchase drivers, behavioral patterns that I'm going to show you today are all leading us towards this concept of not just net zero energy, but net zero carbon. Certainly that incorporates healthy home, and resiliency is another topic that's really top of mind right now to our readers. And again, I'll show you charts and graphs on that. But the fundamentals of getting to a net zero carbon built environment are really not exotic. They are quite basic. In fact, it just starts with climate responsive design, building science, and green building best practices. The next step is the meticulous specification of low carbon products from low carbon companies. And then the third piece to kind of get us that last mile are carbon offsets. So we're going to talk about all of this in the context of consumer demand and the actual focus of this webinar today. But I just wanted to start off with this because it's such an important topic, and I can't share market insights without really starting with the end game. And the reason why this is so important, I think, as we all know, is this trifecta of environmental, social, and financial reality. So environmental reality is that we've hit 1.5 degrees Celsius warming in the last 18 months, and we're going to 2 degrees really in the next 6 to 12 months. What that means is not so much that over 2 degrees, all of our ecosystems are going to collapse, but really it's just that climate scientists will be flying blind over 2 degrees because their models don't work if we have that 2 degrees Celsius warming. So they just won't be able to predict as accurately as they have over the last many decades in terms of what's going to happen, what the impact of superstorms is going to be, what weather patterns are going to be, how wildfires are going to spread. We'll just have less insight and foresight into what's happening in our environment. So we'll have to be more reactive, but hopefully we can take the next handful of years to be very proactive. as well. We also see this growing and mounting social reality where younger generations in particular have this very high level of climate anxiety. This drives a lot of consumer demand that I'm going to share with you. But, look at these numbers. 77% of millennials and Gen Zs consider their future to be frightening, and 56% of millennials and Gen Zs think that humanity is doomed because of our changing climate. That's not 6% or 16%. That's that's over half. So that's pretty substantial. That demands a change, a radical change in our thinking as building professionals as we approach the way that we design and select materials and construct projects. And then, of course, we have the financial reality, which is the pressure that investors and lenders and supply chain partners and municipalities are putting on, again, kind of getting to net zero carbon. I'll talk a little bit more about codes and regulations. Again, we've seen some investors and lenders step back from climate commitments or climate requirements with this administration. I honestly think that that's a blip and not a long-term trend. Look at Target as an example. The reason why Target has really lost a lot of market share, frankly, is because they've walked away from their sustainability and their DEI commitments, and their communities that they serve and their employees feel really abandoned. So we're going to see a change in leadership there, and we may see them revert back to some of those values that had formerly defined them. Now, this is particularly important in the context of the built environment because of how conspicuously consumptive our sector is. I think most of us know that, our buildings and homes and communities in the US account for 40% of our nation's total energy use, 70% of electricity use, 40% of emissions. And emissions have to be reduced by about 50% by 2030, right? That's tomorrow. If we have, and then 100% by 2050, if we have even a chance at staying under that 2 degrees Celsius temperature rise. But unfortunately, not even 1% of our buildings worldwide are considered net zero carbon today. What we do know is that consumers, and again, this data comes from our audience. We survey, we reach, we engage with leading edge and early adopter consumers, the majority of whom now are millennial and Gen Z homeowners and aspiring homeowners. So keep that in mind as I show you this data. Where our readers and audience are today is really where the mainstream is heading in the next 6, 12, 24 months. We've seen the chasm close between the mainstream and our readers in areas like energy efficiency, healthy home, and resiliency over the last handful of years. Our readers, I will say, are perhaps a little bit ahead of the mainstream in terms of decarbonization and some of these more advanced concepts. But as you can see here, again, millennials and Gen Zs firmly believe that decarbonization is helpful to businesses, whether those are manufacturers or builders or other kinds of building professionals, because they think that decarbonization results in enhanced innovation, generates positive brand equity, yields greater financial returns, and mitigates risk. We also know that consumers across the board really are, they want to live in a net zero carbon home. That is growing in importance year over year to all audiences, but it's growing faster within, again, those younger generations, millennials and Gen Z. So not only do consumers really understand what that means to live in a net zero carbon home, but again, those younger generations in particular understand that a net zero carbon home is kind of like having an electric vehicle, and it future proofs their own future. Now, this is a really important slide. There's a couple that I'll point out that I think are some of the most important slides that I'm going to show. This shows that, again, consumers of all ages, but particularly those younger generations, will pay more upfront for sustainability upgrades if they will lower their ongoing cost of home ownership over time. This is something that we are really, really trying to emphasize to builders and to manufacturers, because In a down market, builders, a lot of production builders, and frankly, we're hearing this now. Some of them, not all of them, fortunately, but some of them are saying, "Oh, we have to extract out every dollar we can from every square foot that we build to bring down that price per square foot." When you analyze and interpret a slide like this and data like this, what it shows is that actually first cost is less important than full cost, and that today's home buyers understand that if their homes are energy efficient, they're electric, they're healthy, they're resilient, they're powered by solar plus storage, they're smart, they conserve water, that will actually provide greater total value of home ownership. And so what this shows is that there's actually a little bit of a different level. No, sorry, there's a big difference in the way that millennials and Gen Zs value homes and home ownership versus boomers and Xers, who, when they started buying their homes and throughout their home buying process, even though many of them are already in their forever homes, it was really all about price per square foot and lowest upfront cost, without considering that full cost of homeownership. Now, the reason why I keep hitting hard on millennials and Gen Zs, and again, I think many of us in the industry know this, is that millennials right now, they comprise of over half of all home purchase applications year over year. I actually have an updated slide that includes 2024 numbers, and it's really kind of in that low to mid 50s number, and we can expect for that to stay the same. Whereas if you look at Xers and boomers, which are the red and the yellow lines, those are decreasing in numbers because those generations are, as I said, largely in their forever homes, and they're not moving as much, even though we see on a, kind of a quarter by quarter standout basis, boomers are moving a little more, but again, that's more of a blip as opposed to a larger trend. But really what we need to be paying attention to is that orange line, which, you can see Gen Zs are just starting to hit the housing scene, but those numbers are going to increase like a hockey stick over the next handful of years. And then, oh my goodness, Gen Alpha, the oldest Gen Alphas are going to start buying homes in the next 4 to 5 years. So that's pretty mind blowing when you start to think about that. Now, what we do know is that these younger generations are shifting expectations. They have seized the top influencer position in the housing market. They're spending more money on buying and remodeling homes than older generations. And so we really have to start designing, specifying materials, and constructing to meet those needs. Again, whether that's constructing new homes or retrofitting existing homes, perhaps with the latter being even more important, and certainly the elephant in the room with respect to the performance of the housing sector and our built environment. But this is really important now because those expectations are that homes are going to be net zero, all electric, healthy, connected, resilient, solar powered, resource efficient. And I think that, we're starting to see more and more that these younger generations, particularly even Gen Zs, are moving to secondary and tertiary markets because they can't really afford primary markets. They want that connection with nature. They want a little more space. They want communities with amenities like community gardens and walking trails. They're not really looking so much for golf communities anymore. So it really is a different set of decision-making factors and expectations. We're also seeing a shift in the zeitgeist, so to speak. And this really came from the pandemic when we were told for years that our home was the safest place that we could be. And I think really since the pandemic, homes have been perceived as our sanctuary, intimate spaces that can really help us flourish physically, psychologically, spiritually. And so that's partly why I think that these younger generations are willing to invest more because they don't move they're not planning to move as often. I remember when I first got into the industry, we were on the 7 years 7-year housing flip cycle, where the average time that a homeowner would spend in a house is 7 years. That extended to 10 years, and then 12 years and 15 years. I know some millennials who are maybe in their second homes, and they're like, yes, I'm here to stay. I'm not going anywhere. So that, again, is why it's so important that we develop homes that can be forever homes for these younger generations, and that not only can evolve with their changing lifestyles, whether that's adding children or working from home or whatever that looks like, but also they are future proofed in the sense of they can withstand nature's fury. They've got all of the electrical hookups that they need in order to accommodate smart panels or solar or EV chargers or new systems that haven't even been developed that are going to make our homes fully AI controlled. Now, this is one of those other slides that I want to point out that in my mind is perhaps one of the top 3 most important slides I'm going to show you today. As you can see, the desire to own a home is pretty consistent across the 4 generations, boomers, Xers, millennials, and Zs, that are impacting the housing market today. We don't have traditionalists or alphas on here just because they're not making a big impact on the housing market. However, as you can see, the younger the generation, the more they are considering moving due to climate change, the more they are concerned about climate change impacting the value of their home, and the more that climate events are impacting their ability to get insurance for their home. Look at that chasm between 16% for boomers and 77% for Zs. That's incredible. And that's partly because boomers and Xers are kind of grandfathered into their insurance policies. And they may be in, kind of markets that are more stable relative to climate major markets. With that said, millennials and Zs, as I said, are moving into secondary and tertiary markets where they can afford homes. And those might be in the WUI or the wilderness urban interface in the Mountain West, say in Boise, or in different areas throughout Colorado and Idaho and Montana, or even in California, that bump up against large areas, swaths of national forests that have higher fire risk. So it's partly market location piece. It's also partly just the cost of insurance policies at this point. They're harder for these younger generations to afford. Moving on to Healthy Home. This, as we know, Healthy Home was the belle of the ball in terms of being on the forefront of our national dialogue with the pandemic. And I like to say that the 2008 recession was the best thing that ever happened to energy efficiency, because everybody became super cognizant of their energy bills. And awareness never went backwards. I think the same thing happened with the pandemic with respect to Healthy Home, where everybody became super cognizant and aware of everything from air filtration and air exchange and purification to antimicrobial surfaces, to outdoor living spaces. So as you can see here, those things, air filtration and purification, outdoor living spaces, ventilation, those are really top of mind with respect to all of the 4 generations. And again, Healthy Home continues to be a major driver for all generations, and I just don't see that going backwards. And especially as these younger generations start having kids and need to really pay attention to antimicrobial surfaces and proactive indoor air quality systems and things like touchless faucets and bidets. We also see that the majority of our readers are using smart home technology to manage energy. Whether those are smart thermostats or lighting, or all the way to more sophisticated demand side energy management systems like smart panels and systems by Schneider Electric or SPAN that can monitor energy use and do things like preheat or pre-cool spaces ahead of peak demand in order to reduce grid stress and save money for homeowners. We also see, entertainment has always been a top smart home. In fact, entertainment for many years in the beginning was the top driver to adopt smart home technology. Energy efficiency eclipsed that across all 4 generations a couple of years ago. And then you can also see here indoor air quality and security are major factors for why home buyers utilize and deploy smart home technology. I will tell you, energy efficiency and indoor air quality applications have grown in the last handful of years, where we've seen entertainment and security, again, which were the top 2 drivers in the early years of smart home technology. Those have decreased, perhaps because people already have those applications in their homes. Now, this is the third slide that I'm going to tell you is, kind of the in that top 3 category. Across all 4 generations, for the first time in 20 years that we have been surveying our audience, they are now telling us that they're more focused on long-term value and ongoing operating costs than upfront price and cost per square foot. 20 years ago, again, it was price per square foot. Everybody, that was the metric that people had in their mind. That metric has officially switched. And that's a good thing, because when we look at that long-term value and ongoing operating costs, and we design and specify products and build accordingly, that adds value to homeowners and subsequent, so not just the first home buyers, but subsequent, second, third, fourth, fifth homeowners. Ultimately, when we solve this equation, it will add profits for builders, as well as for dealers and manufacturers. Right now, unfortunately, because of the way that most homes are appraised and most mortgage and lending vehicles are set up, the industry still overutilizes that antiquated valuation metric of price per square foot. We, along with many, many others, are trying to really get the appraisers, the realtors, the lenders to flip that on its head. And fortunately, some people are listening. So, for example, there's a friend and a colleague of mine with a company called PRMI. His name's Don Worthington. He is now offering a mortgage that incorporates energy efficiency, electrification, and solar into that mortgage in such a way that homeowners can afford to incorporate those upgrades into their homes without taking any money out of the pockets of the builders, right? So it doesn't cost the builder anymore. It actually doesn't even cost the homeowner anymore either, because their mortgage rates stay the same, because that mortgage incorporates cost savings from energy efficiency and electrification and solar. So it's really intuitive and simple. It's just a matter of having the will to change some of these very long-standing systems and approaches that have been in place. But fortunately, there's a growing chorus of voices now that are calling for this shift in valuation metric, that we're actually making some progress. The next thing I want to talk about is, I've been talking a lot about millennials and Gen Zs and how, their expectations have shifted, not just from smart homes, but to net zero carbon homes. They like flexible spaces. They need home offices now, because we are a, more remote workforce than ever. They like prefab homes. They actually believe they see prefab homes and all electric homes like electric vehicles, precision engineered. They don't have the same stigma that older generations have with prefab. I think older generations associate prefab with, mobile homes or Sears kits that really weren't high performance homes. That's a very dramatic perception shift with millennials and Gen Zs. But now, as Gen Alphas are, again, 4 to 5 years away from purchasing their first homes, it's going to bring in a whole new set of expectations. AI-powered automation and predictive technology that takes human error out of the performance of homes, right? So that has to do with energy, it has to do with indoor air quality and water, it has to do with resiliency, right? So having systems that can predict not just weather patterns, but wildfire storms, flooding, and do things accordingly in that home. They're looking to go beyond net zero carbon to regenerative right? So products that actually store carbon, they kind of capture carbon out of the air and store it. There's a variety of those types of insulation. Green fiber insulation, as an example, has a great story with respect to carbon storage. There's some siding products that can do the same. So again, there's going to be a whole new set of kind of decision factors when it comes to specifying products for this whole new generation that's coming into the market. Modular shape shifting interiors where rooms can be a bedroom at night, a yoga studio in the morning, and a schoolroom during the day. And certainly nature integrated biophilic designs. And then looking at, I think a lot of our designs are predicated on the emergence of suburbs from the 1950s, where everybody was so excited about having a car and the garage was just the dominating factor in our home designs. That's going to go away for this generation because they might not even have cars, right? They have they have self-driving shared vehicles that they don't need to own, they don't need to make payments on. They want to live in car-free zones, walkable communities and neighborhoods. They can catch an Uber or hop on public transportation. So again, a very different way that these younger generations are perceiving their homes and their communities. We see a continued shift, and this shouldn't be a surprise, towards energy efficiency and smart home technologies, insulation, windows and doors, lighting, smart home systems and controls, heat pump technologies. Those are certainly getting a boost in terms of consumer demand, solar plus storage, indoor air quality systems. Even a shift in thinking around induction cooktops, which, when they were first hitting the scene here in the US at least, there was a lot of pushback because they weren't gas stoves. Nowadays, again, those younger generations, every time I talk with them about this topic, and we have a group called the Next Generation Influencer Group where I talk pretty regularly with millennials and Zs and now a little bit alphas. They say, well, why would I burn gas in my home? Like, that's unhealthy. I don't want to do that. Why wouldn't I have an induction cooktop? It's faster, it's safer. So they really get those benefits and they're pulling through these advanced technologies. And, builder adoption, while it kind of lags consumer demand just in general, we definitely see just a really quickly growing interest in things like demand side energy management systems, high performance building envelope systems. Some of those are site built. Mostly, though, we're seeing a very big increase in interest from builders in offsite and modular. So maybe not full prefab homes, but systems built, kind of factory built wall systems that have quality control and precision engineering and, saves them time. They don't have to construct these walls in the field. They can do site work while their walls are being built in a factory. So growing demand for that. And then things like cool roof systems, of course, high performance insulation, et cetera. When we ask our consumer audience how willing they are to embrace technologies, leading edge technologies, again, similar interest in things like demand side energy management systems, high performance building envelope systems, cool roof systems, IAQ systems. So the interest in these advanced technologies is being mirrored both in the builder and the consumer sector. When we ask our consumer audience what they think the biggest benefit is to owning all electric homes, it's really kind of tied about-ish between the fact that they can reduce their environmental footprint and they can save money. And when we ask our builder audience how interested they are in electrifying their homes, nearly 10% say that they're already doing it, which is great. That's a number that's growing quickly year over year. Over 30% say they're very interested, and about 37% say they're somewhat interested. And then when we ask that same question to consumers, 20% say they're very interested, and about a little over half say they're somewhat interested. We also see that even without incentives, Electric vehicles are on the rise. Consumers, a growing number of consumers, and over about a third now say that for their daily commutes, EVs are the most convenient for them. And about 40% have dedicated home charging stations. Nearly that same amount are considering installing one. So I just showed this slide. If you're a builder or a developer, that home charging is a thing that people are interested in, and it's something worth planning for. When we ask our consumers which energy efficiency upgrades are the most important to them, upgraded windows, insulation, roofs, smart thermostats, those are some of the leading answers. Now, I want to shift gears a little bit, and I want to talk about kind of go back to this concept of decarbonizing the built environment. So as you can see, there's definitely a push in terms of consumer demand for energy efficiency, electrification, healthy home resiliency, solar plus storage, water conservation, smart home. To match that growing demand, we are seeing a shifting regulatory environment where net zero carbon plans are starting to be required in California, in Massachusetts, soon to be coming in places like New Jersey, New York, Colorado, where builders and developers are going to have to submit these net zero carbon plans before getting a permit. We are also starting to see that some of these municipalities are requiring larger commercial buildings. Right now, it's mostly for buildings over 10,000 square feet, but that's going to trickle into the residential sector on a community level in terms of reporting scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions. If you're not familiar with those terms, I'll talk about them in just a second. But suffice to say that game on. It is here, the market is shifting. We're seeing that change in demand. We're seeing the change in regulations as well. Now, the way that we can respond to that is by making better decisions to future-proof our homes and our communities. So as I mentioned earlier, the first step in decarbonizing the built environment in order to meet that shifting consumer demand and regulatory environment is to, as I said in the beginning, deploy climate responsive design, green building, and building science best practices. I am not a building scientist, nor am I going to spend a lot of time here on what those green building and building science best practices are. But suffice to say, energy efficiency, electrification, health and wellness, renewable energy, advanced technologies, all of these things that we're seeing homeowners demand are all critical in this stage of getting to net zero. The nice thing is that those things align, right? If consumers were focused on polka dot cabinets and we're trying to get to net zero carbon, like there's a disconnect there. But I think that we can all see that the demand is there to justify enhanced performance and decarbonization in the built environment. We're really talking with our builder and our developer partners, our manufacturers, as well as now with our homeowner and home buyer audience about embodied carbon and operational carbon. So embodied carbon, if you're not familiar with it, is basically all of the emissions that are released in order to build a home up until the day the home is occupied. So from the first minute that the first raw material is extracted, all the way through to that house being occupant ready. So it's, material extraction, it's transportation, manufacturing, packaging, more transportation, installation, construction, et cetera. Operational carbon is any emissions that are released once that home is occupied. So it's, energy use, it's, it's anything for heating, cooling, lighting, operating the house once that house is occupied. The next stage in the decarbonization of the built environment is the meticulous specification of low carbon products from low carbon companies. And this is kind of hard to do if you consider that there's about 20,000 product inputs and about 450 SKUs for different types of products. in a typical American home. And there's just not that many low carbon solutions. What we are finding is that environmental product declarations, or EPDs, that are created from life cycle assessments and product category rules are also growing in demand. And so that there's a growing level of awareness and, again, demand from both builders and building professionals like designers and architects, as well as from consumers with respect to these environmental product declarations. And what we like to say is to the folks that are paying attention to this, don't only look for the EPDs, but also look for the corporate sustainability messaging and reports from the companies themselves. Fortunately, not many companies that are not green have EPDs. They kind of go hand in hand. I mentioned scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. And in case you're not familiar with these terms, scope 1 is basically anything that a company burns in terms of emissions. Scope 2 is emissions from any kind of electricity or energy that a company buys. And then scope 3 has to do with everything else: transportation, packaging, just manufacturing impacts beyond the energy and electricity. Even use of product and disposal of products. So as you can see, scope 3 is kind of this big gnarly thing. It's about 80% of all the emissions from companies. It's pretty hard to measure. Fortunately, a lot of companies, even though they're not being required to, for the most part, they are already starting to do it because they see the writing on the wall. Either they do business in Europe, which does require scope 1, 2, and 3 reporting, and so they're just bringing it here to the US to future-proof their businesses, or they understand that California, which has passed 2 climate laws that will require companies over $1 billion in revenue to report on scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. But what that does is it doesn't just impact those very large companies like the tech behemoths, which are already measuring scope 1, 2, and 3. But because of scope 3, any vendor, any builder, any supplier to those behemoths are going to have to report up to them. So what I am saying to companies is, look, if you're not already thinking about all 3 of these, you should, because pretty soon someone's going to ask you for this reporting, and you don't want to get stuck without some kind of response. What we also know is, again, we're going back to some of this consumer data, that consumers are more likely to choose a product from a company with strong sustainability practices. So, over 75% tell us that they're very likely or somewhat likely to choose a product from a company with strong sustainability practices over one without. They believe that companies with strong sustainability focus are more likely to have long-term financial success than those without. Nearly 60% believe that. About 75% of our readers tell us that they've stopped purchasing products from companies because of their sustainability practices. And here's another interesting one that I want to point out. Over half of our readers believe that the quality of a company's products or services is tied to their sustainability practices. So whether that's true or not, that's the perception. And that's pretty interesting. Now, I mentioned earlier the social reality of climate change. We know that 85% of Gen Zs, as one example, claim they've been greatly affected by climate change. 64% feel guilty about their negative impact on the environment. But fortunately, about 80% of them believe that they must step up to make a difference in the world, and they're doing that. But they really want companies, whether those are manufacturers or builders or just, consumer product companies, the companies that they work for, that they buy things from, to be a part of the solution. They want those companies to be engaged with them. They want to share their voice. They're going to be more motivated to buy from and work for companies that have strong sustainability practices. And you know what? That didn't go away even with the change in administration, and it's not either. Now, the problem, though, is that we are at historically low levels of consumer trust. You can see, that Nearly 70% believe that millennials believe that companies greenwash very often. And so we have to be extremely careful about the claims that we make. We have to make sure that they are authentic. What we see is that consumers would much rather see a company blunder and admit it than blunder and try to sweep it under the rug. And we've seen many examples of this. Again, I use Target or Volvo. This was several years ago when they, tried to cheat emissions tests. They lost a lot of market share, especially from younger consumers who believed that Volvo was really wholesome. Excuse me, I'm saying Volvo and I meant to say VW. I apologize for that. So I think that there's examples of companies that have said, oops, sorry, we messed up, we're going to make it better. And those companies tend to get more compassion and understanding from skeptical audiences as opposed to the ones who just try to gaslight their customers. Now, here's some more important slides. Over 80% of our builder audience are now specifying products with those environmental product declarations that I mentioned earlier. And of the ones that aren't, of the 15% that aren't, you can see here that almost all of them, 95%, believe that they'll be specifying products with EPDs in the next year over the next few years. We see that our builder audience, about 45% now prioritize EPDs on par with other certifications like Energy Star, which is really important because, Energy Star, WaterSense, Indoor Air Plus, these rating system certifications, labels, brands have been in the market for much longer than EPDs. So just the fact that nearly half of our audience are saying, yeah, EPDs are equal to these other certifications. And about 25% now say that EPDs are their top priority. We also see that about 65% of our builder audience tells us that their consumers are looking for products with EPDs. And about 20% of our builders say that while consumers might not be specifically familiar with EPDs, they are looking for product certifications to verify sustainability. Now, the last piece in the decarbonization equation that we're seeing a growing demand for are carbon offsets. Now, if you don't know what a carbon offset is, one carbon offset is the equivalent to removing 1 ton of carbon out of the atmosphere. There's different kinds of carbon offset projects. There's nature-based projects like forest conservation and replanting projects, all the way through to really high tech or technology-based projects like the ones you may have heard of, direct air capture, that use big fans to suck carbon out of the air and store them in the ground. There's also things like landfill gas capture, biochar conversion projects, abandoned oil and gas mine capping, and things like that. Now, there's a big chasm between high quality and low quality carbon offsets. High quality offsets do things like address additionality, meaning they wouldn't have been done anyway. They're specifically created to sell carbon offsets. Those carbon offsets are permanent. High quality projects eliminate double accounting, meaning low quality projects that double account. They plant a tree and then they sell that tree planting as a carbon offset 10, 100, 1,000 times. That's bad. High quality projects have third-party certification and very clear reporting and pricing and benefits and results. We are now actually providing and selling carbon offsets to our builder and developer and manufacturer partners, as well as to consumers. And the reason why I wanted to keep this information in this presentation about consumer demand is because we are starting to see more and more consumers say, gosh, I can only do so much. I have to still drive my kids to school or drive to work. I don't have an EV. Maybe I can't afford one, or I'm just not in a place where I'm going to buy a new car right now. Or, I still generate a certain amount of trash, or I still travel for work, on airplanes, which has an incredibly high carbon footprint. And so they are counteracting just their daily life and activities with carbon offsets. We are also starting to see more of a preference for builders that are delivering zero carbon homes with carbon offsets, not just for embodied carbon, but also as an incentive, let's say a 5 or a 10 or an even 30-year operational carbon offset package that offsets the operations and use of that home for 5, 10, or 30 years. The good news is that carbon offsets are really not expensive in the grand scheme of things. Even if you look at the high purchase price of homes, this is really not going to, an embodied or an operational carbon offset package to create a net zero carbon home or create net zero carbon products for those homes. It's really not that expensive. So with that, I am going to just wrap up simply by saying, first of all, thank you all for being here, and thank you for listening to my spiel, because as Jennifer knows, I love this stuff. I love talking about consumer purchase drivers and the decarbonization of the built environment. Fortunately, those purchase drivers support that transition to net zero carbon. And I think really what the opportunity here is for all of us in the building industry, whether we are software products or dealers, distributors, builders, developers, or even manufacturers, is to really recognize what these purchase drivers, behavioral patterns, and expectations are for consumers, and then provide those solutions accordingly. I do think that getting to the goals that we need to get to in order to, one, meet our climate goals, but also to meet consumer demand, will require a blend of innovative thinking on behalf of builders and developers, but then additional innovative thinking on behalf of the service providers, the software platforms, the product manufacturers, the lenders that provide solutions to those building professionals. And, I think we all, kind of play in our own silos, but each of those are interconnected. And it's really important to understand, the end game, and then to build back from there in order to make decisions today I use this term a lot, but I'll use it again, to really future-proof our homes and our communities and our buildings for a changing environment, for transforming consumer expectations, and for a changing regulatory environment.
Amazing presentation, Sarah. Thank you so much. There was so much information in that, and really appreciate. We'll be sending out the video afterwards, but I also want to address a question that we have, and then I also want to show something that we have on Build Exact. So for the builders and remodelers looking to make this tangible for their clients, do you recommend any tools or methods to systematically calculate and present a 15 or 20-year total cost of ownership forecast?
Yeah, great question. And it's very layered. So first of all, of course, Build Exact is a great platform. So I'm going to give you guys a plug in terms of decision-making and streamlining specification processes. In terms of really understanding carbon footprint and carbon impact, there are carbon calculation tools, and I'm not sure if that's exactly what you're asking about. There's one that's kind of generally accepted as kind of the leading tool right now called BEAM, the BEAM calculator. And then what we are also going to see is, if you're not familiar with this, so a gentleman named Chris Magwood from the Rocky Mountain Institute is leading a group that actually ResNet helped put together, that is creating an ANSI standard. It'll be 1550. ANSI standard 1550. It should be released later this year. My sense is that it'll probably go into next year in terms of when it's actually released, because we're still in a public comment period right now. And I think that's really going to help streamline, first and foremost, the actual measurement of embodied carbon for residential, single family, and multifamily units. Next, what that will do is it will provide infrastructure for whether it's municipalities that want to adopt net zero carbon codes and need an ANSI standard in order to do that. That helps streamline their process. And then we'll see everything else fall in place in terms of building the case studies and ROI in order to kind of justify and bolster and propel all of this forward. Um, and so sorry, Jennifer, I want to get back to the question. Let me look at it real quickly. Recommending tools or methods to systematically calculate and present a 15 and 20 day total cost of ownership. Okay, so I'm kind of not quite on that question. So in terms of, sorry, let me go back to total cost of homeownership. The answer is it depends. It depends on where you are, because obviously utility rates differ. And it also depends on what level of home you're building or specifying. So there are different ways to calculate total cost of home ownership. If you look, the simplest way is just simply to look at the performance of your home. Do you have solar? Are you able to supply all of the energy to the home with battery backup? Are you pulling some energy from the grid? Are you supplying energy and getting credits from the grid? And then just basically calculate the total cost savings for energy over time. It's a little bit harder at this point to quantify indoor air quality and like water savings in terms of total value of home ownership. We're working on that. So I would say if you're looking for something like embodied carbon, that's the beam tool. And then if you're looking at total value of home ownership, I'd start with the energy piece because that's a lot kind of lower hanging fruit in terms of how you can calculate that.
Yeah, that's awesome, Sarah, and thank you. And I think that there are some folks that are working on that. And like you mentioned, some of the national labs. And I think that they're working on tools like that. And I do see some startups that are kind of getting into that space. I mentioned that I'm going to show something real quick on Build Exact that kind of ties in, that definitely ties into what Sarah was presenting. You'll see Build Exact now on your screen, and I'm logged in as a builder, and you can see I'm under estimates here. I'm going to go into a custom home estimate that I have sitting here. And then when I go into this, I'm going to use our new AI estimate reviewer. So going to the estimate costings, and you can see there's tons of different categories and they're broken down. If I expand these each, they're going to be broken down by many different subsets, different products, everything, the materials, the labor, everything that's in there in the estimate. But if I go to the blue estimate reviewer, the blue is our AI assistant. What I did was ask it, I've already asked this. So I asked it about you making this the most energy efficient and ready product with renewable energy. So when it reviewed this estimate, it gave me all of these items to check for in the estimate. So I'm sure has anybody here had a mistake in the estimate? Well, this will try to find the mistakes and identify them before you send it off, so you don't miss something. You could have a $10,000 miss in a $200,000 project, and that's a big hit to your profits and margin. So this is going to give me clues to make this more energy efficient based on what I fed it. If I go back to the estimate reviewer, actually, let me show a different estimate. Look at this kitchen remodel project. And if I go to the estimate reviewer, you can see, I'm going to do this again, sorry. When you go into the estimate reviewer, it also, Sarah pointed out a couple different things about how people are worried about climate change. And you can go in, you can select, and you can say, this house is in a flood zone or a wildfire zone. And we'll check your estimate based on that criteria as well. So you can check as many as you need. And if you're not familiar with those codes or some of those building practices, it will identify those within the estimate and make you a little bit smarter without you having to go through that part of the process. So again, I will wrap this up. Thank you for taking a look at that. Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you everybody else for joining us today. And you'll get the recording via email.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, Jennifer. It was a pleasure, and really, that what you just showed was incredibly cool. I'd like to spend a little more time with that sometime.
Yeah, so and the AI, our AI assistant Blue will also do AI takeoffs and will generate estimates. So it just in a matter of minutes, and it's based off of the hundreds and even thousands, tens of thousands of projects that we've had gone through our system in the past. So again, thank you everybody for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.